Hello, welcome to Social Emotional Behavioral Learning, or SEBL, a brief overview. My name is Lindsee Fryatt. I am the SEBL statewide lead for Nebraska MTSS. Today, we're going to define social emotional behavioral learning, describe what it is and why it's important, and how it connects to the Nebraska MTSS essential elements. So what is SEBL? Let's first start with SEL. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, defines SEL as a process of developing healthy identities, managing emotions, achieving the goals you set for yourself, feeling and showing empathy, and establishing and maintaining healthy relationships, and making responsible decisions. SEL advances equity through school, family, and community partnerships, environments that feature collaborative relationships between schools, families, and communities, rigorous and meaningful curriculum, and ongoing evaluation to ensure we're meeting the needs of the students and staff we serve. SEBL is the process of fostering social and emotional competencies among students and adults in order to create safe and supportive environments in which students can have positive behavioral outcomes. So we've defined SEL and SEBL, so why the B? Throughout our time, I'll primarily use the term SEBL. We intentionally added the term behavioral to our approach to SEL because we felt it was important to align and connect all the systems that support students. We don't want behavior in SEL to operate in silos because we know that one supports the other. Students cannot exhibit positive behaviors if they don't have the social and emotional skills and tools they need to be able to do things like manage their emotions, handle conflict with peers, handle disappointment or frustration. SEBL focuses on fostering those skills and creating safe and supportive environments in which students can have positive behavioral outcomes. Many times, many of the terms surrounding student mental health and social emotional behavioral learning are used interchangeably. And while they are similar, it's important to identify common language that accurately describes each. We've shared our definition of SEBL and we'll use that language going forward. It's important to also define, though, mental health, as social emotional behavioral learning is a protective factor for student mental health. Mental health encompasses our overall social, emotional, and psychological well-being. Sometimes mental health is mistaken to mean mental illness, and that's not the case. Mental health is our well-being. It's how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we perceive the world around us, and how we handle stressful situations. Social, emotional, and behavioral learning supports this because the competencies foster the skills needed to protect and maintain our mental health. Mental health is not simply the absence of mental illness either. It's important to also define behavioral health. How your actions impact your overall physical and mental well-being is the definition of behavioral health. There's a significant connection between the behavior of a person and the health of their mind and body. SEBL is one way to support the overall promotion of mental and behavioral health. However, it's not the only way, but SEBL is a protective factor for mental health. When it comes to mental health and behavior, we often think of them as separate things, but in reality, our emotions and our behavior are two sides of the same coin. We need to start thinking about what emotions or feelings may be underlying the behavior that we're seeing. Behavior can be thought of as an external action that is the manifestation of our thoughts, feelings, and past experiences. A great way to illustrate the interconnectedness of this is through the cognitive behavioral triangle that you see on your screen. Our mental health encompasses our thoughts, feelings, behavior, and past experiences, and essentially they all impact one another. This is why it's critical to teach the essential skills of social, emotional, and behavioral learning so that students can better understand their own interconnectedness of their well-being. There are 5 SEBL competencies that we have adapted from CASEL. They are across the settings of classrooms, schools, homes, and communities. We look at these competencies both from the perspective of student development, but also from adult mastery. The competencies remain the same across not only different environments, but also across the lifespan. So now that we've reviewed the what, let's talk about the why. Many schools have a behavior framework. At Nebraska MTSS, PBIS is a core piece of who we are. Regardless of the existence of a specific behavior framework infrastructure like PBIS, all schools have behavioral expectations for their students. Students need foundational social emotional skills in order to demonstrate those expected behaviors.
I'm a data guy, I like numbers, and we have a lot of evidence that social emotional learning has made a difference.
We had a graduation rate of 62%. Last year, we put up a record-breaking 84%.
Over the last 5 years, our expulsions have been cut in half.
We were suspending about 13,000 days of out-of-school suspension. We were 10 times the average for any school district in Ohio. And within that first year alone, we were able to reduce our out-of-school suspensions by 55%.
Attendance rates went up. We know that attendance is directly correlated to academic improvement and achievement, but it also had other outcomes that were extremely important, which is students feeling more connected to schools, educators having to think outside the box, helping students overcome some of the challenges that are in their life.
There's an 11-to-1 return on investment. So for every dollar invested in programming around social emotional learning, we're seeing that they're saving $11 on remedial programs, dropout prevention. There's lots of reasons that people are coming to the conclusion that this is something that we need to be prioritizing.
This video by Castle really does a great job of laying the foundation for what we're going to talk about next. So a 2013 study involving school-based universal programs, including over 270,000 students, grades K through 12, revealed these findings. Exposure to a social emotional behavioral learning program found links to increased social emotional skills, improved attitudes about self, others, and school, positive classroom behaviors, and an 11 percentile point gain on standardized achievement tests. There was a reduced risk for conduct problems and emotional distress in students. But SEBL is not only impactful for students, it's also impactful for adults. Teachers who possess social emotional behavioral competencies are more likely to stay in the classroom longer. They have protection from burnout by developing and managing nurturing relationships with others and with their students. They serve as a behavioral role model because they regulate their own emotions, which then helps their students to do so as well. As they mentioned in the video, the average return on investment is 11-to-1. This study out of Columbia University shows that for every dollar invested in programming, you save $11 that would have been spent on costly interventions such as remediation, dropout prevention, recovery, and others. There are statistically significant associations between social emotional skills in kindergarten and young adult outcomes. This study, which controlled for demographics, found that kindergartners who were stronger in social emotional learning had these outcomes. They were more likely to graduate from high school, complete a college degree, obtain stable employment in young adulthood, and they were less likely to live in public housing, receive public assistance, be involved with the police, or reside in a detention facility. So when it comes to adults, we know that educators are stressed. They're facing challenges they never anticipated they would when they went into teaching. This is a time of great unknown and uncertainty. In a fall 2020 survey via the RAND Corporation, some 80% of teachers reported feelings of burnout as a moderate or major concern. The same survey found that more than half of teachers, or 57%, reported working more hours per week during this school year than they did before the COVID-19 pandemic. And teachers in the lowest poverty schools were more likely to report working more hours per week than teachers in the highest poverty schools. The same survey also found that overall, about 1/4 of teachers indicated that they were likely to leave the teaching profession. The large majority of those teachers indicated that they had been unlikely to leave before the pandemic. Teachers are burned out. They're putting in long hours and they're thinking about leaving the profession. When it comes to our children, 1 in 6 US children aged 2 through 8 had a diagnosed mental, behavior, or developmental disorder. Among children aged 2 through 8, boys were more likely than girls, and among children living below 100% of the federal poverty level, more than 1 in 5 had a disorder. Approximately 1.9 million children ages 3 through 17 have been diagnosed with depression. Being diagnosed with either anxiety or depression among children aged 6 to 17 increased from about 5% in 2003 to 8% in 2007 and 8.4% in 2011 and 2012. You can imagine what the numbers would look like today with the impacts of COVID-19. We anticipate that new CDC data will show these numbers to be much higher. So with regard to COVID-19, research from previous pandemics such as SARS, Ebola, H1N1 show that children who must isolate or be quarantined may be 5 times more likely to require mental health service and experience higher levels of PTSD. Compared with 2019, the proportion of mental health related ER visits for children aged 5 to 11 and 12 to 17 increased 24% and 31%. The shadow of COVID-19 will extend for a period long after this is over and we have the physical aspects of the crisis under control. We will see future waves of impact for many years to come, and the biggest impact of that will be this third wave, the mental health crisis. What we've learned from prior disasters is that the impacts trigger mental health challenges, especially for children. We see 3 waves when it comes to disasters. The first is the physical health crisis, and the second is the economic crisis. We're in the thick of these, with high COVID-19 numbers, astronomical death tolls, and the economic impact on our communities and our businesses. But what we're just now starting to see is this third wave, the mental health crisis. As we see students impacted from loved ones diagnosed with COVID, loss of loved ones from COVID, forced quarantines like we talked about before, and just the developmental impacts of being raised in the time that we're living in, we know that these will have a long-term impact on our children. After Hurricane Katrina, in a 2013 meta-study of disasters, nearly half of parents reported an increase in emotional or behavioral difficulties in their children. And 3 years later, 28% of those children were still exhibiting chronic dysfunction, with greater impact among those with prior instability and lower family or community support. It's likely that COVID-19 will continue to impact our children for years to come, and we need to be prepared to provide support for these children, especially our vulnerable children. By providing SEBL supports for staff and students, we can help students foster resilience in the face of this COVID-19 mental health crisis. The most common factor for children who develop resilience is the presence of a committed relationship with one supportive adult. Children who do well in the face of a serious hardship like COVID typically have strong relationships with important adults in their family and their community. While the impacts of COVID-19 do represent our current reality for students and staff, and that may feel bleak, we don't have to stay stuck in this space. Probably the biggest silver lining is that mental health has been destigmatized. It's talked about more openly. We recognize that many people are facing mental health challenges. We can move forward into a future where we support student and staff mental health and social emotional behavioral learning. School has become the primary place for this. Mental health and SEBL is being talked about more widely and prioritized in schools. COVID-19 has presented us with many challenges and hardships, but it's also presented us with incredible opportunities for growth. We've pushed ourselves into new learning, doing things we never knew we'd be able to do, learning new skills. We found deeper relationships and more meaningful connectivity in ways that we hadn't done prior to this year. We know how staff are feeling. The numbers show it, their faces show it, they're telling us in their own words. And we know the challenges our students are facing. But we also know what we can do to support them through this, and that's social, emotional, and behavioral learning. So why school? Some people might question if school is the place for these types of supports, but there are many reasons why school is the optimal place. Positive school climates, integrated with social emotional learning, improve school safety and reduce bullying. Students who are involved in social emotional learning do better academically and socially. And youth are 6 times more likely to complete mental health treatment in a school setting than any other community setting. Schools are the primary mental health service provider for children. 60 to 80% of children who receive mental health services do so in schools. And 20% of students receive some form of school mental health service annually. We know that school is the best place to access children, as we have them in our buildings for a significant portion of the week, and we can't control what goes on outside of the school. We also know that we have to support adults. We can't expect these things of adults if they don't have the social, emotional, behavioral skills themselves to support the young people that they teach. So now that we've briefly touched on what SEBL is and why it's important, let's talk about how. And the how of SEBL is truly MTSS. If you've ever attended any of our NEMTSS professional learning opportunities, you've probably seen these two images countless times. However, we feel it's important to take a step back and again acknowledge the big picture. Even for SEBL, this is the big picture. SEBL belongs as a part of a multi-tiered system of support for students and staff, and those supports should be identified through a system of database problem solving. Just as these are foundational elements to your academics, this is also true for social, emotional, and behavioral learning. SEBL is most sustainable when it's embedded within a well-functioning MTSS framework. So these are the 6 essential elements of MTSS, and each of these have a home in SEBL. They are the backbone and the foundation of SEBL. Shared leadership. There must be shared leadership in SEBL. We must engage everyone in SEBL across the educational setting, from administrators to teachers and support staff, bus drivers, nutrition services staff. Everyone must understand the importance of social, emotional, and behavioral learning, and they must have knowledge about not only themselves, but the students that they serve every day. Communication, collaboration, and partnerships is extremely important when it comes to SEBL. Family and community partnerships are of high priority for building a sustainable and impactful SEBL system. We know if we don't engage families and partner with them to support students, we're not going to be successful. Families truly are the experts on their children, and we must engage them as such. Community partners are an incredible resource to us as they're doing wonderful things to also support student social, emotional, behavioral learning and mental health. And we need to access those as a resource to truly provide a whole child approach to supporting students. Evidence-based practices must be used to provide curriculum for students. We do many, many things every day, all day long that support the social and emotional development and the mental health needs of students. But when we're providing core curriculum and instruction, we must make sure that these are evidence-based. Those everyday wonderful interactions that you have with children to support their needs and build relationships are critically important. But we have to make sure that when we're providing curriculum and intervention with increasing intensity, that these are based on evidence on what we know to work with students, and particularly with the population of students that we serve. Decisions around students' social, emotional, and mental health needs must be based on data. These have to be objective decisions based on data. We have to have a balanced system of data collection to make decisions for how to support the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students. SEBL must be strong at the core. It must be part of the culture of the school environment in everything that you do. All students must have access to a strong SEBL core. And when we use that database decision-making through a problem-solving process to determine that some or few students have increasing needs for support, we can then provide them increasingly intensified instruction and intervention. This is our layered continuum of supports. So we have a strong core that all students have access to, with shared leadership where all staff members are engaged in SEBL. And then we use database decision-making and problem-solving to provide evidence-based practices for a layered continuum of supports. All of this cannot occur without first building the capacity and infrastructure within our systems. Our SEBL professional development series focuses intently on building the capacity of educators. When we build educator capacity, we build educator social, emotional, and behavioral development and build up the adults in our building. So we create that infrastructure that helps them to better support and model for students. So you might be asking yourself, how do we do this? We at Nebraska MTSS offer a module series on building your SEBL system within MTSS. Your regional lead can bring this SEBL series to your area. Module 1 is the exploration and planning module. This goes deeper into what we've talked about today. We do a foundational assessment of your specific building and district, and then do some action planning around that assessment. Module 2 focuses on the adults. We start with the adults, supporting them in building their own skills to model and support for students. We talk about building systems to support educators in environments that foster self-care. It's not enough to just tell teachers to practice self-care. We have to build systems that support educators and create environments for them to genuinely practice self-care and provide them with tangible and meaningful strategies for how to do that. Part 2 of Module 2 focuses on creating inclusive climates by helping adults do some reflection on how they can identify and address their own biases that we all have, and create more culturally responsive environments for students and staff. In Module 3, we move into student SEBL with 2 tracks, early childhood and elementary, and secondary. We separate these tracks by age level, but they are aligned. The messaging is the same regardless of the age level of the children that you serve. Here we talk about positive and inclusive climates and evidence-based practices at the school-wide level and the core. In Module 4, this is where we look at student-level problem solving. If we first focus on the core, we should have more students benefiting from that core and fewer students needing targeted or intensive instruction. This is where we focus on interconnected systems and continuous improvement and how we keep evaluating to continuously ensure we're meeting the needs of our students and staff. We can offer this module series in your area if you get in touch with your regional lead, and we will work to provide it to the students and staff in your area.
I, Timothy Schreiber.
I, Chicken.
I, Roger Weisberg.
I am making a commitment to contribute to a caring, just,
And thriving community, nation, and world.
I commit to prioritize my own social
And emotional learning.
And to promoting the social and emotional learning of children,
Young people and adults.
I pledge to examine my emotions, my identities,
My beliefs, and my biases.
and how these impact
The way I interact with others.
The way I teach.
the way I lead.
I will help to create spaces for people
To recognize and understand their emotions,
our inner lives,
strengths, and assets.
and channel them toward productive action
And collective well-being.
I commit to listening to
Young people,
elders, and to those
Who are different from me.
귀를 기울일 것을 약속합니다.
I will work to build meaningful relationships.
Trabajaré para construir relaciones significativas,
so that I could better understand their experiences, their perspectives,
Cultures and stories.
And I will contribute to creating inclusive communities.
Where everyone feels a sense of belonging.
使团体中的每一个人都有归属感。
I will help create learning environments
where young people find purpose and passion. I will work alongside you
To identify and dismantle inequities.
to move towards a shared vision.
how our schools and communities should look.
I promise to work together on solutions to stand up to injustice.
And to use our collective voice and power
To create learning spaces, schools, workplaces, and communities where everyone can thrive.
I will use my power,
My privilege.
My time.
My work, my influence, my lived experience.
My love, my passion, my energy, and my resolve.
I pledge to use all of my energy and all of my opportunities to further the cause of all kids everywhere.
Because you commit to social and emotional learning together.
we can build stronger schools and communities today.
and a more just and caring world today and tomorrow.
So if that video resonated with you as something you'd like for your school and your community, or if any of the content that we talked about today really hit home for you, and you're interested in learning more about social emotional behavioral learning or bringing it to your ESU, your district, or your school, please get in touch with your Nebraska MTSS regional lead. We have 5 regions across the state, and you can find the contact information for your regional lead by going to nemtss.unl.edu. We're happy to bring this to your area and to help build capacity in the staff so that you can better support the students' social, emotional, behavioral learning needs in your schools. Thank you so much to Castle for providing the wonderful videos that we showed today. And thank you to the regional leads for partnering with us and getting this information out. Thank you.